I want to hand over now to our third speaker today, Roya Ghafele. Roya is the director of Oxfirst, an advisory firm specializing in law and economics. And Roya, I want to mention also that I noticed that for the third year running, Oxfirst has been awarded the prize for the best IP valuation firm in the UK by the Global 100 Awards. So congratulations on that. And we look forward to your talk.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, Duncan, and thank you for putting this initiative together. Like all of you, I have been basically in self-confined for the last couple of months, have not left my home, and it's been tough. And I really just wondered, what can I do? How can I contribute with what I know to help resolve the situation? Because there's not really a point about talking about anything else right now until we all can just go out and have normal lives again. And I hope at least that this webinar is a little bit of a contribution, but I think much more will be needed. And no matter what skill set or competence people have, I would hope that we'd come together, collaborate, exchange, and think how on earth we're going to get out of this situation. I thought that the talks from Rochelle and Henning were incredibly interesting. They are looking at the big picture of global governance. I have worked in Geneva for WIPO for many years. Before that, I was actually involved in the FCTC under Dr. Derek Yack in a different life. And I did my PhD on the WTO. And what I have seen in practice is all of these things take forever. We don't have that time. Any type of multilateral discussions and negotiations to come to grips with whatever are such a long shot. By that time, it's all going to be gone. What we need are quick, pragmatic solutions which are operational right now and which help people to just figure out a way that we can work and live again normal lives. So I think what I've been trying to contribute to this debate is to think how can we come to grips in a bit of a quicker shot rather than having very long multiple multilateral discussions in Geneva and other places in the world, which in the worst case scenario need to be decided by consensus, which means it will be incredibly hard to find a solution. And can then in the end, I wonder what the relationship is then going to be also by bilateral free trade agreements, which seem to be somehow enable people to circumvent in some way the multilateral framework. Also, what will it mean when members such as the United States are leaving the World Health Organization? What power of decision-making does WHO still have? So what I want to focus in on my talk is the question of what we can do to improve research output and how intellectual property can help in achieving this. Interestingly, when I pitched my ideas to the main press, I was told this is just some esoteric area of law and not of interest for the general public. The Times got back to me 6 weeks after my paper was already long published, saying it's actually interesting, but we just had a very brief article on something from the WHO, which seems to be something about compulsory licensing. We're not really sure. And we think with that, we have really covered the topic. And I sent back to the journalist that I really don't agree with you, but he said it's not a main topic. And I think the first thing we'd have to swing is to sort of like make it clear to people IP is a major topic. It's not some sort of like sub-issue of a sub-issue for some geeks. And the way we can maybe achieve it is to get the pitch across in a non-jargon way to people who have the power to make decisions, because what we need for all of these things to happen is political will and the motivation for countries and corporations to work together. If we are not having that political will, and if there are going to be further bigger political tensions that prevail, it is really going to be counterproductive for everybody. So against this context, if you think about the generation, about the value chain of IP generation, of knowledge generation, you need to keep in mind that it's public-private partnerships play a major role. Universities are at the source, to a large extent, of IP and knowledge generation, also in this area. but a university does not have the capacity to pass on all this knowledge into the market directly. A university doesn't have the product facilities, it doesn't have, I don't know, the product distribution channels. For this, it needs a company. So the relationship, between companies and universities and how they are being managed, I think is instrumental in achieving an output that will assure that we get quick results, good results, and that results for a cure for COVID-19 are available to everyone on this planet. And here, I think you need to keep in mind that universities and business have to a large extent different interests and different motivations. And the art is to manage these different tensions in a way that it will be beneficial to society and humanity. If I look quickly from a university's perspective, most universities have an obligation to protect the public interest. After all, many universities around the world get funded through the public, and what may be counterproductive is if research that's first funded with public means then gets passed on to a company who then sells it back to the public, but with a significant profit margin. I think there somewhere in this value chain, there's a disconnect where someone needs to recognize that this was in the first instance made possible through public funding and shouldn't be redisseminated with a seriously makeup to the public again. Universities research is also characterized by the fact of having a lot of IP in many different areas, which is simply reflecting the fact that the university is driven by people who have fun with their research, and nobody is dictating an institute to just do research in a very concerted specific field, which would then allow to have a concerted patent portfolio, which may be a strategy a company may want to pursue. So many universities have patches of IP, and I think what can help tremendously is if these various patches of IP are being put together, rather than have a little bit of patents on some specific stuff in Japan, a little bit in the US, and a little bit in the UK, and somewhere God knows where, and everybody does their own thing. It's just going to be, because of the very nature of how university research happens, it's just more productive if these universities aggregate their patents eventually and have a more concerted portfolio, and then look concerted in a joint way how to pass on that technology to the companies. The companies, again, are kind of different animals. They are often listed on the stock exchange. They need to make profits. They need to make sure they succeed in the market. If they're not able to do this, they go out of business. So for a company, it is very hard to just say, look, it doesn't matter, we'll offer all our facilities for free and we'll disseminate everything for free, because that's just not a viable way for a firm. So how you're managing the profit motive is, I think, instrumental. And there, a university has the power to state its claim and to say, the way I want to structure the technology transfer agreement is that I want to assure that there's adequate access for patients in developing countries, that poor parts of society are given adequate access to the intellectual property, and that there are a whole bunch of exceptions fiddled into the contract, which assure public health and health for all, which is the aspiration of the World Health Organization. But strange enough, I'm not seeing this enough. I'm seeing quite a bit of, I mean, there are obviously historical examples where it has happened. Yale recognized this in one of its deals, and the company Remdesivir, or the Remdesivir eye drugs are actually already, it has been assured that they will be available for free at lower cost for patients in developing countries. But what would be really needed is a more systematic thinking among the universities and their tech transfer offices of how they can assure better the public interest. And I think this is looking at the public interest of IP ex ante, rather than looking at it ex post and looking at remedies such as a compulsory license, which in the end is a massive interference in markets. looking at it from the outside is a little bit less harsh for everyone. And it's not happening enough. And I think from this, it comes in and by itself, and is self-explanatory that you cannot work within national borders. You need to have the freedom to work internationally and have global alliances. And I think it goes without saying, having just narrow national boundaries among universities is not the best research strategy. And as a practical step to figure that out, I think there would be a certain need for awareness raising. Maybe in the UK, the Intellectual Property Office could issue some guidelines for tech transfer offices of how to better manage the public interest. I also think there's a point about how universities value their IP and how they set the licensing rates in case they want to license their IP. From what I've seen so far, this is a bit a black spot generally speaking, but when you then say, and most universities are not super, like how they're really valuing their licensing rates is a bit coming still out of thin air, and there could be more meat, more substance to that. But I think what would be good is if, maybe it's 2 steps ahead, but you can always set out visions. Assuming universities have better understood the matter of value of IP and setting rates in a way that can make sense from an economic perspective, it would be great to set as end goals the public interest rather than just mere commercial interest. So to really value the IP from a perspective of public health and to recognize the need for access as a fundamental aspect in how the rate is being set, which may also make it a bit easier for a company then to meet that criteria. So I think these are all clearly more maybe a bit more operational steps, and where I really see signs of concern is that I'm seeing none of this right now particularly applied. I'm seeing with the greatest concern that we are following more and more narrow national approaches rather than creative international research strategies, which would just assure that we get faster to a result. Maybe in other political areas on which I cannot say what the right thing is or the wrong thing is, this may be okay, but right now it's just really an unpractical thing to do. And we really, really need to give the academics the chance to just ruthlessly and recklessly work with whoever is the right research partner, no matter where in the world they're sitting. And that can have a chance of producing quick results that can bring us back to a normal situation.
Thank you, Roya. That was a fantastic tour of the thorny and difficult issue of public-private partnerships.